this in your pursuit of medical studies?
You're talking about the quota business?
Yes.
That happened a couple of years before I enrolled in the University of Manitoba, and one of my classmates had a sister who was a little ahead of her. And I guess through 1930s or even late 1920s, there was a secret quota at the University of Manitoba, which had different categories. And the Anglo-Saxon, French, Scandinavian people were category 1, and they were admitted to medicine even if they had a failed course. They were given a chance to make it up during the summer exam, whereas excellent students, including the Jews, and Ukrainians and other people, were in the lowest 4th category. And even if they had excellent marks, grade A, they were often not admitted. There were some professors who were opposed it. For example, you may have heard of Dr. Morley Cohen, who was a Jewish student. He was almost not admitted, but there was a Professor Wardle, I believe he taught zoology, who intervened on his behalf, and he got enrolled, and he was the man who introduced the open heart surgery in Manitoba in 1959 that I had the pleasure of participating and monitoring the vital signs of the patient at that surgery in 1959. But it has to be said that what was happening in Manitoba was not unique. That was the case throughout North America, in other Canadian universities, particularly often in Quebec, in the United States. And it was happening when I was, before the war, in Poland. I had a family in Krakow that I mentioned, and there were 2 brothers, and the younger of whom, who was killed in 1944 uprising staged by the Polish underground against the Germans. He was a student of medicine, but what existed there was so-called bench ghetto, numerous clauses for admission, but Jews were assigned specific benches to sit during lectures. In protest, they refused to sit, and they stood in the back of the lecture and took notes. Some of the Christian Polish students stood with them, supported them, and they were beaten later by the anti-Semitic Polish students for standing with the Jews. So that was really generalized and still is. I guess anti-Semitism has been referred to as the longest hatred, and it certainly is so.
Thank you, Stefan. And I just wanted to share for the anonymous person who sent in that question or others who are interested, Stefan does talk about this piece in his book. So feel free to purchase his book and read about it more there. The next question is addressed to Nigan. Nigan, how do you feel, or what do you think about the Pope and his apology?
So I spent all last week doing this, so I encourage people to look me up on YouTube. Much bigger answer. There's 2 parts to it. The first is that it's an imperfect apology in that it's got lots of problems with it. He uses the bad apples argument, saying it's a few people in the churches, or he apologized for the actions of a few people. That's not the issue here. The issue is not a few bad apples. The issue is that the Catholic Church has been encouraging, protecting, holding. When I say encouraging, meaning that there's systemic problems in the church that facilitates the creation of sexual predators and physical abusers. And so there's a problem in the Catholic Church that's systemic, and it's not a matter of a few bad apples. It's a problem of the church itself, and that the church just can't seem to fix itself. It needs some kind of bigger issue. Also, the matter is that it goes far beyond an apology. The fact is the Catholic Church still has stolen lands and creates hundreds of millions, billions of dollars globally, and refuses to pay survivors. So it owes survivors under the settlement agreement in 2006, $30 million, as high as $60 million in some cases, and has refused to pay that amount. Like every other church has paid their debt to survivors, not the Catholic Church. So like the apology is missing out on all of those different things. And so it's not a suitable, there is going to be another opportunity when he comes to Canada, and he's going to come to Canada probably in, I've heard September, maybe July or September seems to be the two dates that are rolled around. I heard that he's going to Alberta. So, you know, I hope that he learns how to make an appropriate apology. That being said, there were survivors at the Vatican in Rome that accepted his apology, that were quite moved by it. And there were people like Phil Fontaine, who attended the exact same Catholic residential school that my grandfather attended and experienced sexual physical abuse, likely from some of the same perpetrators. He accepted the apology. He said it was the words that meant a lot to him. That's good enough for me. Like, we need to stop questioning survivors. We need to say to survivors, we embrace your experience. We honor you. And we need to stop saying that, you know, oh, well, it's not good enough for me. Like, if it's good enough for survivors, let's start there. Let's start there. Because it's really the survivors that we're all here because of. The survivors worked so hard for us to have a space like this. You know, if it wasn't for someone like Stefan writing a book or working so hard to make sure that we never forgot and that we heard these stories, we wouldn't be here. So let's stop questioning survivors. So I'm not questioning I'm not saying the apology was a bunch of garbage like some people are saying. I'm saying that the apology certainly wasn't perfect, has lots of gaps and issues, but I would never call it garbage because survivors have said that it's not. And I'd say the same thing about the Canadian national anthem. My grandfather fought under that flag, and he fought under it not because he thought Canada was a great place, but because he believed in the idea. He believed in the idea that people could come together and learn together and grow together. Because for the most part, you know, my family experienced that until 1907, till the government removed us. And so my grandfather believed in it. That's good enough for me. I will stand up for the national anthem, not because I believe in Canada, but because I believe in my grandfather.
Thank you, Nigan. The next question here is from Shelley Chachana. She asks, Nigan and Stefan, please comment on the influence of social media today with respect to the legacy of residential schools and the Holocaust, especially misinformation and distortion. So perhaps, Stefan, we want to start with you, and then we'll go to Nigan on the influence of social media.
The role of social media? Well, I guess that goes back to what I mentioned earlier, that one has to, I think social media is probably harmful in many ways, while at the same time it allows people to communicate and to get together for worthy causes, but one has to exercise caution and try to assess whether what one hears is true or not. One has to have this critical ability, and one has to try to overcome one's own bias, and that's very difficult to do for all of us, I think. I don't know that. So it's a double-sided sword, I would say.
that's a pretty good answer. All I'd say is that the greatest, social media has given us the greatest thing possible, which is that any of us can share our opinions, our ideas, things we've learned, and people will hear it, or they will listen, or they will opt in. That's also the greatest problem, is that anybody can say anything now, and you can be the most ignorant, unread, racist person in the world, and then we all have to endure that tweet or status update or YouTube video. But the question is can we be critically conscious? Can we be aware of when people are trying to obscure or distort or manipulate a story for their own purposes? And that's the real key. That's where skill is. The skill is not in clicking like on a video or clicking on a video. Skill is in listening and going, what do I think about this? Do I know this is true, or do I experience this as true? What can I do to go find out more information of whether this is, which is why it's so important to be aware that there are sources that have agendas, like newspapers and certain media agencies, places like universities and colleges, where they have a mandate, they have a mission to try to tell a fuller story than simply 140 characters on a Twitter feed.
Thank you, Nigan. We have time for one last question, but what I can do is I can take down these questions and share them with our guests, and also Belle and I can help in answering some of the factual ones for those who have shared today. And this last question is from a student named Sophia in grade 10 at St. Boniface Diocesan High School. Sophia asks for both Stefan and Nigan, what is the most significant thing you have learned about humanity in your life? Nigan, perhaps you can go first, and then we'll go to Stefan.
Nobody is born racist. That is the most significant thing I knew that. I sort of knew that, but I really knew it when I became a parent, is that when I spend time with my daughter and all the other children that I would spend time with at her, sometimes her daycare, sometimes the play group, sometimes I spent a lot of time in play parks, is that no child is born with racism, is that racism is a learned behavior, so therefore it can also be deconstructed. And if you adopt that as a life principle, it gives you hope, because you know that those people in the world, people who are political leaders or people who are leading movements of violence, that there is even hope in them. There is hope that we, through reason, you have to believe in reason dialogue, you have to believe in peace, you have to believe in justice.
Thank you. Stefan, for yourself?
Well, I agree, but I think it goes back to what I may have mentioned earlier, that I believe that within any group, indigenous people, Jews, Ukrainians, Anglo-Saxons, Chinese, that there's potential to do good and potential to do evil. And it is within perhaps every human being. And so we have to try and exercise our better angels rather than the darker angels of our nature, as somebody said.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Let's give Stefan and Nigan another round of virtual applause. Thank you so much for joining us today. During difficult times such as these, including the invasion of Ukraine, human rights violations, and injustices locally and globally, we can look to and take inspiration from upstanders of the past, with the shared goal of creating a more informed society to combat racism and anti-Semitism. In the words of Anne Frank, what is done cannot be undone, but one can prevent it from happening again. How wonderful is it that nobody need wait a single moment before starting to improve the world? I challenge and encourage each of you in attendance today to determine one action you can take to improve our world. I now welcome back Val Garniewski, Executive Director of the Jewish Heritage Center of Western Canada, to close things off in a good way.
I just want to thank all of you, Miigwech, Nigan, Stefan, and Carly, for this wonderful program, and to the many people who joined us today. This was so moving on so many levels, and I hope that everyone will continue to explore and learn more about these very, very important subjects that mean so much to us and for the world going forward. I'd also like to mention that at the Jewish Heritage Center, we are currently renovating our Holocaust Museum completely. And we hope to see students and teachers and the general public back in the next fall. And we're very excited to be able to tell this important story in a new way, and also to highlight the experiences of all of our survivors. So again, thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Miigwech, I got to run to another thing here, so.
Thank you.